What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex, you watching a Ragin Ronin review. I got a review for you. Last Friday, I saw The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that would, of course, be the sequel to The Amazing Spider-Man, both of which are directed by Mark Webb, and Mark Webb has been bringing his own flavor of storytelling into the mix of this rebooted franchise, and let me tell you what I think about it. First of all, I just want to say that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of my most highly anticipated films of 2014. There's a lot of hype surrounding this film, and I was really looking forward to watch this film. And this film is actually kind of hard for me to review. I'm going to do it, of course, in this video, but let me tell you why it's so hard for me to review. It's because there's two ways to review this movie. First of all, you can review it as a comic book movie, and then you can review it as a film. Alright? When I'm talking about as a film, I'm talking about story, characters, narrative structure, the visuals, plot, conflict, climax, resolution, all that stuff, okay? All that juicy stuff that you learned about in high school with regards to like knowing how to put together a book report. Anyways, now with regards to reviewing it as a comic book film, it is a great film. It is a fantastic film. It's actually quite a spectacular film if you're reviewing it as a comic book movie. In fact, the main reason why a comic book film, or rather a movie adapted from a comic book, would be a really well-made film is because it is true to the comic book. And let me tell you something, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is true to the source material, simply because it feels like it took a lot of the elements from the comic books and directly translated into live action. I mean, with the exception of how they handled Rhino, the character of Rhino, I think a lot of the things that apparent in this movie, that happen in this movie, are really well done as a comic book film. So I gotta say that this is a really well done comic book film. Now, on the other hand, I like to review movies as a film because I want to give it the most unbiased opinion about it, okay? Like, I don't have any, I want to feel like I don't know anything about, you know, the source material. I want to know how I feel about it as a film, okay? From beginning, middle, and end, alright? So, that's what I'm going to do for you guys, and let me tell you that as a film, this movie suffers from a number of problems, okay? Like, there's a lot of great things about it, but there's still a lot of other things about it that don't make it quite work and need a little bit of improvement. Now, let me explain what that is, okay? Now, if you've read any of the reviews are really quite mixed. And I do not want to compare this movie with Batman and Robin simply because, like, this movie is way out of the same league as Batman and Robin. Now, a lot of people are making that comparison simply because there's too many villains. Okay, you got Jamie Foxx as Electro, you got Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn, who we all know becomes Green Goblin, and then you have Rhino, okay? This is all seen in the trailer, so this is not a spoiler at all, okay? 3 villains right there, and then the first comic book movie that ever put in a lot of villains to make character or villain overkill is Batman and Robin. So that's why a lot of people are comparing it to Batman and Robin. But let me tell you, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is nowhere as bad as Batman and Robin. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is actually a very good film, alright? But a lot of people, so what I like to do is compare to Spider-Man 3. Now, Spider-Man 3 is the weakest of the Sam Raimi trilogy, but I'm making that comparison because there are also 3 villains in Spider-Man 3. Sandman, the Goblin #2, and also a Venom, okay? And I feel like a lot of the way the villains are handled in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is comparable to the way the villains are handled in Spider-Man 3. And that just doesn't work for the film, alright? And it also doesn't work for the comic book fans because they want to see their beloved villains or the characters fully developed, or at least given an amount of screen time that really just does the character justice. Now, okay, what I find the biggest problem about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is just the narrative is completely all over the place, okay? First of all, the first Amazing Spider-Man film has a very linear style of storytelling. It's very straightforward. It's really about one thing, and that is Peter Parker discovering the mystery of his father's death, and then or the mystery of his disappearance rather, and then it leads to all these other events. Okay, now The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we're dealing with all these different subplots, and each particular subplot has its own tone to it. So first we have, we have the Peter Parker dealing with Gwen Stacy's father's death. So there's like moments of sadness, and then we have Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker dealing with each other. Okay, so that is like a lot of other things. Like you have romance, and then you have comedy, and then you also have I guess the sadness of not being able to be together. And then you have Max Dillon's character, who's I find he's a very relatable, sympathetic character because, he's underappreciated, and a lot of people in the world are underappreciated. So I can respect that, okay? And then you have the relationship, or rather the friendship between Harry Osborn and Peter Parker, and that felt like that was just thrown in there. I'm not saying that like they just slapped it on. I'm just saying that suddenly Harry Osborn comes out of nowhere, and they just happen to have this long history of friendship together. I mean, from a very long time that we never even knew about. Okay, I mean, if you're a comic book fan, you know about it, but like these characters were just thrown in there, and suddenly they have this relationship. But let me tell you that I do like the chemistry that between Dane DeHaan and Peter Parker. I wish I could have seen more of that. I wish I could have seen their friendship develop even more, because it kind of started off from scratch. Because they were kind of estranged since you haven't seen each other for like 10 years. But I would have liked to see more of that relationship. Because when I see them together, skipping rocks and just talking about, their girlfriends and all that stuff, or lack of, it really made me smile, because I felt like these are two characters that are very, very human, okay, dealing with really human problems, okay, but we didn't get enough of that, all right, so I wish that could have been improved. Another thing is that you also have this little subplot or little small detail of Aunt May trying to deal with her own problems, all right, and that is trying to work harder to make ends meet, all right, and that was something taken straight from the comic books. But I feel that there's like so many elements that just don't need to be there to make it for a more smoother film. I feel that the tone of this movie is very choppy. It's all over the place. And I never felt like I was really bored. I mean, I like the character of Peter Parker. I never felt that it was boring in any way. But I just felt that it does affect the pacing of the film. The narrative structure just feels like it's up and down and up and down. And then, it's a comic book movie, all right? We need to start seeing some comic book action, all right? Essentially, there's really only 3 action sequences. There's the opening with Alexei Setsovich, and then you have the introduction of Electro, and then you have everybody all at the end. Okay, and I feel that there's when it's not sequences of action, I feel like the movie doesn't know what it wants to do. I think that Mark Webb is a decent storyteller, but I think that he was way too caught up in how he would want to make The Amazing Spider-Man 2 better than the first one, and he just threw in way too many elements, and I think that a lot of that had to do with setting up the sequel. I felt that the sequel, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, was way too focused and way too bent on setting up the Sinister Six film and The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Because there's so many things, there are a lot of things that aren't really explained and not really resolved. We know what's going to happen if you're a comic book fan, but for the general audience, we're probably thinking like, what is all this about, right? This stuff isn't even like really explored, right? So I feel that as a film, it doesn't really work. The story is just a little bit of a mess. The direction, the storytelling style, it's a little bit messy. The tone is all over the place, and it really affects your enjoyment or your engagement of the film. But there are a lot of great things. For example, first of all, like I said, I love what am I talking about? I love the chemistry between Peter Parker and Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. The chemistry worked in the first film. The chemistry continues to work in the second film. I love that the character of Spider-Man is starting to have more fun. Okay, when you see him web slinging in the air through New York City, this is as good as it gets until they make the third one and make it even more innovative. But we've seen a lot of, we've seen of the previous 4 films, Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, The Amazing Spider-Man, and the first one, all right? But the way Mark Webb does the web slinging style and the direction of the way of this stylistic comic book style action, it is really like on a whole other level. I think it like they really found a way to bring the audience to enjoy comic book style action, and it's done really, really well. This character of Spider-Man, he does so many new things with his ability to web sling, and it's just excellent. Okay. So I love that about the film. I love that the action is spectacular, but I do feel that Electro is kind of overpowered, okay? When we're talking about balancing villains, there's a huge balancing act for Mark Webb to do because we have a lot of villains. We have Green Goblin, we have Electro, we also have Rhino. And I felt that, you know what, to be completely honest, they could have cut out Rhino like completely from this film, okay? If you removed the beginning and also the other scene where he becomes Rhino, it still would be the same film, okay? Think about it, all right? Like, those were just fillers, okay? The main bad guys really are Electro and Harry Osborn as a Green Goblin. And I would have loved to see more Green Goblin because I feel that he should be the you know, it should just be one villain. When you really think about it, it should just be one villain, not 3, not 2, just one main villain. Develop that character of Harry Osborn and his friendship with Peter Parker more throughout the film. That way we can feel the heartbreaking, you know, the loss of their friendship, and I think it would have made a better film. All right, so there's just too much going on there, and once again, like I said, Sony wanted Mark Webb to really set it up for the future films. There was too much of a focus on that, all right? And there you have it. Now, I was totally looking forward to Hans Zimmer's score in this film, and I feel that it's a little weaker than James Horner's score, and it's mainly because it's not just Hans Zimmer. There's another band that put together the dubstep for Electro's theme, and it just appeared every time that Electro was put on, which I think was appropriate and it worked. But because of that, you don't get to hear enough of Hans Zimmer. All right, Hans Zimmer makes some very epic scores, but I don't think this was epic. So you know, a lot of weaknesses about this movie, but still a very decent installment in the film. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I think that, you know, I watched it once, I'm done. In my opinion, it was a little bit forgettable. All right, so slightly disappointed. Still very exciting, a lot of fun. As a comic book fan, it's great, but the story structure is all over the place and makes it a little bit messy. Just a bit off with the direction. Oh, with regards to the 3D, I did watch it in 3D, and I found that just like the storytelling, the 3D is also just as inconsistent. It's a post-conversion. The first film was actually shot in 3D, but this time it's a post-conversion, and I felt that the only times the 3D worked was in the web slinging scenes. Anytime the Spider-Man is flying around, the 3D works. Anytime he's not flying around, I didn't feel any depth, okay? And the main reason why it worked when he's web slinging is because, well, Spider-Man's CG, they can make him pop out and in and out of, like, you know, the depth of field as they see fit. Anyways, the score I give it is 7 out of 10. All right. You know, I was about to give it a 6.75, but I'm gonna give it a 7. Visually, it's really quite stunning, and it has some really spectacular action sequences, and it was still fun. But I had some higher expectations with regards to the story. All right, I am looking forward to The Amazing Spider-Man 3, and I think that you guys should still check it out in the theater. It's worth checking out, all right? There you have it, 7 out of 10. That's all I got to say in this video. As always, if you enjoyed this review, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation, follow me on Twitter, @Ragin Nation, check out my Instagram photos, @The Ragin Nation. My name is Alex, I'll see you next time, peace. So far, as far as I know, Harvey Elder is just Harvey Elder. Kind of like how he was Samuel Stearns in the Incredible Hulk. If you don't already